Coach Robb podcast, answering questions and eliminating frustrations about health, wellness, and performance since 1987.
Well, welcome back to the Coach Robb Podcast Network. Another episode of Meet the Guest. This show is brought to you by our friends at BMW. Mr. Toolman Dan Colvin, how the heck are you today, buddy?
Dude, this is weird. This is weird because normally, Coach, I'm driving the ship and you're driving the ship today. So this is a little odd for me, but I'm doing great, buddy. I'm looking forward to this one.
When was the last time you did something for the first time? Without letting that go down a sensual path, think about the question of when was the last time you did something for the first time? It gets far and few between, doesn't it?
Man, I'm such a creature of habit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I had not too long ago that I never had before was Thai food.
Okay.
So that was something I ate that I'd never eaten before. But I'm such a creature of habit, dude. I like to go where I know things, and I don't like to stray very often. But it's weird. Like sometimes I'll stray, like I'll go like way the F out there. Like just
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Well, I'd have to meet you on that. I've never had Thai food. Nothing about it seems enticing. There'll probably be some listeners that say, oh, you don't know what you're missing. As you know, Michaela's a gourmet chef. She's got a palate for everything and anything. And I'm like, nope, give me the straightest, narrowest, most bland food. Pepper makes me sweat. So I'm with you, brother. I don't deviate too much. What I love about this format today is I can't remember the last time, whether it's on Moto, I was going to go down the multitude of different moto capacities that you're in, but most of the time you're driving the ship directly, or even maybe just right behind there. But I don't think you've ever been the interviewee, if I can maybe go so far. When's the last time you were interviewed, no matter what market you were in?
The last time I was interviewed was on the outside gate. So Aussie Steve, we call him Aussie Steve. He's from Australia.
Yep.
He is a hardcore moto head, main event moto head. He's been listening to the show forever.
Okay.
And he wanted to do his own show, Australia based. He's just the guy is he is a gem, man. He's just an awesome dude. But he asked to interview me. I was one of his first guests on his new show, and then since then he's interviewed like Emig and Donnie Hansen. He's had like just a bunch of guys on his show. So yeah, I think that was the last time.
Okay. Well, it's great to have you.
I did Dark Side's Motopod show too.
Okay.
That was a long time ago, but it's been a while, man.
Well, and that's the whole idea here. I've got a pretty loyal group that loves this show. I get a lot of feedback, and I always say, who do you guys want me to try to get to interview? And when your name started coming up on the list a little bit more, and it was kind of interesting. They're like, hey, you've got this show that you've got with Toolman and Dan. We don't know anything about them. We've seen them on Moto Aftermath, and we've seen them here, and we've seen them all these different places. And you're like, okay. Main event moto, excuse me, and you're just like, yeah, I see him and I know him and I see him at the races. I recognize him. We don't really know much about him except staunch conservative, pro guns, pro Trump. Let's make America great again. And for those of you that don't agree with that, that's cool. That's one thing that we always say. We can agree to disagree. Let's open an adult beverage and talk about why we have differing opinions. We don't have to get bipolar or get polarizing with this. But man, let's start today's show. How did you even get into the podcast network that you're in? I'll leave that generically. And then I think a lot of people want to know, how'd you get the Toolman Dan? But how did you get into the podcast side of it? How'd you get into the industry? For those of you who may not know, Toolman Dan, a very big figurehead in the moto industry. So I apologize, I was remiss on that at the beginning. But how'd you get to where you're at, very top line, before we get into some deep questions?
So back when I was young, I raced Daniel Blair. We raced PW50s at Sacramento Raceway. Little did we know, we didn't realize we'd raced each other until like 30 years after, right? But we'd realized we raced each other. Daniel was obviously, he was arena cross. Everybody knows Daniel Blair. I don't think I have to explain who he is, but he was arena cross champ. He's from Northern California, and I'd see him at the track every so often, and we'd BS. And I was a tool dealer at the time for a certain brand of tools, and
Mm-hmm.
he was starting Eagle Grit at the same time that I was doing that, and he reached out, knowing that I work with the automotive industry. He's like, hey, I've got this new hand soap, and I'd like to see if you could help me, break into the automotive industry. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So we kind of connected, and then he's like, yeah, and I do the Main Event Moto podcast, and I'd listened to it before, and I'm like, I know, dude, that sounds so fun to get into, like that'd be really fun to do one of these days. Oh, dude, you ought to come on one time. And I'm like, all right, yeah, it sounds awesome. So he invited me on the show, and ever since then, it went from like going on maybe once every 6 months, right, to once every 3 months, and then once every month, and now it's every week, a couple times a week. So I've been pretty deep entrenched into Main Event Moto, and um, the other Bat Bros. That's Daniel and Joe, and producer Joe. If everybody hasn't listened to Main Event Moto, producer Joe is like the best human ever. Close to you, Coach Robb. You and Joe are like neck and neck for the best humans in the world.
No, I appreciate it.
But
Did you get to meet him at the original Batcave where you and I ironically met for the first time in person?
let's see. Yes,
Okay.
yes, the
All right.
one. Yeah. The one in
Yeah.
the Bat Cave in the
The
ghetto.
Batcave in the ghetto. That's it.
Yep.
I,
Oh no,
I,
you met him at the not at the original Bat Cave.
okay.
You met him at the second Bat Cave. We're now in the third Bat Cave,
Yep.
but yeah, the first original Bat Cave, rough, rough neighborhood.
I love it.
The police helicopter would fly over almost every episode. It was like clockwork.
I love it. Well, I just remember the first time I walked into the back cave and got a chance to meet you. And, it's so funny when you try to put a face with the name. And I never knew you were as tall as you were, didn't know you had such broad shoulders, not to sound like weird. Like, you kind of get a voice and you never met somebody, you come up with some kind of an idea and never would have put the two together because, you're much taller than what your voice sounds like. When you're producer Joe, you can tell he's a big boy all the way around with that deep voice, and he's got the radio voice going. And I just remember being in the back cave. That was quite an experience. And
Oh yeah.
until you're in that environment and get a kind of a pulse of it, it's pretty exciting, pretty cool. And I just think it's awesome. Not to dote all over each other, but when you have yourself, producer Joe and Daniel, that's an incredible three amigos, dynamic duo.
The cool
So
thing with
props on all
the
that.
cool thing with the Main Event Moto, and for me specifically, like one of the reasons I'm, people wanted me back on the show. They like listen because I, I'm an open book. You know what I mean? I'll tell you exactly how it is, and I'm honest as the day long. You know me, Coach. I'm extremely loyal
Mhm.
to the point where I get made fun of a lot. Obviously, I'm a huge Cowie guy, and I love AC, and I love Fox. I don't deviate from that, and it's I get flack for, but we have a lot of fun with it too. But
Absolutely.
it's cool because I don't. Yes, I am entrenched into the sport, right? I have Main Event Moto. I've got a normal day job, and then I got a very successful side business, right? My DCMX and Tools. I'm sure we'll get into that, but I don't make a living, and I don't have to rely on a living doing podcasting. So I think it gives me a chance to be a little bit more dynamic in my thoughts, and you know kind of spewing some of the facts and stuff out there without having to worry about somebody firing me, right? And of
I
course, I
never.
always try to be respectful because there's a time and a place for things, and, and
Mhm.
I and I I realize that. And obviously, Daniel is very entrenched in the sport, and I would never do anything to you know jeopardize him or his role. So, but yeah, we have a good time.
But you bring up a really good point. I never really thought about this. If you look at some of the most well appreciated, authentic shows, they tend to be the ones that are not on someone's payroll, that are essentially live, as you articulated, living off of the industry. Now that you say that, literally putting that concept into words, some of the most prolific websites and some of the most prolific podcast shows, especially if you look at the organic growth over the last 3 to 4 years, have been those that are not on payroll, that have a secondary job. And ironically, that side job, secondary job, in your case, primary job, is outside of the industry. I think that's what's allowed the landscape to change quite a bit. So, and that's one of the reasons why I like this podcast show, getting a chance to know who you are, get to know who makes you what you are today. And we've had, some very diversified guests, and I'm really excited to dig into exactly what and who makes you who you are today. I'm going to ask a favor, though. I need you to move your head to the side. I want the diehard fans to see that is like the holy grail in the Dan Colvin office. If you went in there and so much as touched that frame, you might lose your fingers.
I would not sell this. I would not. The only way that I would sell this or give this thing up is if my child's life depended on it.
And ironically, she knows that, I think.
Yeah, no, that's my prized possession. I got that in 2013 at Adam's last Hangtown race. So I was stoked to get that, from super appreciative of that.
Well, I was so thankful. For those of you who don't know, I had AC when he was on 85s, and I had one of his original neck braces. Yeah. And I fired that bad boy off to Mr. Toolman himself.
Got it right here.
Yep.
It's freaking badass.
And what's cool
a piece
about
of AC amateur history right here.
Exactly. And nobody, hold that back up real quick. Look at the back of it. Something we don't see very often anymore is the DC shoes. Remember when it was, who was a Vans rider, who was DC, who was, I'm trying to think of some of the other shoe companies that were so big. Obviously, Vans and DCs were the Etnies. That's the other one I was trying to think of. Yeah. I knew there was not Vans. It was Etnies and DC. And I remember the DC ads, they had AC and Villopoto and McGrath. And you think about that as a category, how cool that was. A shoe company that was fighting the same way that you see the sports or the energy drinks today. Oh, he's a Red Bull. Oh, no, he's a Monster. Oh, he's a rock star. Back then it was Etnies. It was DC Shoes. It was Vans. It was, I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the listeners will probably correct me and remind me of a couple others, but I thought that was cool on that. And not only are neck braces not what they used to be, right? But you look at the sponsors that are on those, and I thought you'd appreciate that. And I've got I still have a few more things. Like I have Jordan Bailey's. I have a couple of things of him as an amateur. And one of the things that I think is cool is it's over your right hand shoulder. It's the left side as people are looking at the screen. If you're watching this on YouTube. What if Jetson goes on to beat McGrath's record? What if Jetson goes on and becomes, he got ostracized for it. Oh, I'm after McGrath's records. And everyone was like, whoa, you might want to pump the brakes a little bit. And isn't it interesting here in the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden the rumblings that we might see somebody that could go out and surpass all those records, that jersey to your right might be worth a little bit someday. Yeah. Is it autographed?
It is. Yep.
Oh, dang.
I got that at Salt Lake 2023.
And I apologize. Is that a Geico Honda? Yeah, it's a Honda, right? It's got to be Geico Honda.
No, that's a factory Honda.
It is factory.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Now looking at the Lawrence on the back, that's his signature since he's gone 450.
I've said on record, I believe he's going to beat McGrath's record.
Whew, it's pretty hard to argue when he's won everything and he's only 19 years old. Now, like we've already seen, if an injury were to derail him, but right now he just seems like he's, I don't know, that I think that was a freak injury that he had, freak accident. But we're catching ourselves getting into bench racing, so we'll pump the brakes on that. But for those of you who are big moto heads, I want to make sure that you got a little bit of a background on what Dan has in his office. And like I said, that shadow box, the Holy Grail AC himself. So Dan, thank you so much again for being with us here. I always like for the listeners to get a better idea. Give us an elevator presentation of how in the world did you get where you're at in the moto industry. Talk about racing P-dubs with Daniel. That's pretty cool. It's interesting how it's a very small world.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're doing a show with them now, multiple shows. You've been with them for quite a few years. Bring us up to speed. You as a racer, did you grow up in a moto family? I know you've got your daughter riding now, but bring us up to speed. How did you get to where you're at specifically in the moto industry?
Yeah, I started when I was 3. I on a Z50 at a Z50 that it's crazy because I maybe I was 4. I was 4. It was the 1988. So if any listeners out there, if you know where I could score in 1988, it's the all red Z50. Hit me up.
Mhm.
They're extremely hard to find. I want one for my office, but I want a replica of my first bike. But I started on the Z50 and started racing. I was 4, and that quickly escalated. Although I was the only one on a Z50, I got a PW50 after that because the Z50, if you remember, Coach, the tires on those things were big and wide. They were like these mud tires, right? And so at Sac Raceway, that just wasn't conducive. So I talked my dad into getting me a PW50, and that's what Daniel and I raced against each other on the P Dubs. He went on to obviously be a much better amateur motocross rider than I was. Um, I got, I was probably maybe 7 or 8 years old. I was still on 50s at the time. I had a pretty bad get off at Prairie City, and I actually told my dad, I said, I want you to, I want you to sell my dirt bike. I don't want to ride dirt bikes anymore. I want a quad. Of all things, I asked for a quad. So he sold that thing, bought me an LT80, and so started racing this quad. And which I don't know if I've ever shared that story of me riding quads and racing. Yeah. So
Is that a Suzuki LT80?
yep,
Okay. All
yep.
right.
So I rode that for a while, and then I ended up getting bored of that thing, and eventually got another dirt bike and kind of raced, here and there. But I was very, very big into BMX. In fact, when I was younger, I was probably a better BMX rider than I was a dirt bike rider because I rode literally every day. We had dirt jumps in my grandma's backyard that she completely let us transform her whole backyard. She had like a half of an acre, maybe close to a full acre. We just transformed it into full on dirt jumps. And then, I was racing at the time. Coach, you probably remember Powerlight.
Yep.
I had some support from Powerlight through one of the local bike shops, and raced all the way up to 16 expert, and I won a national in Roseville. That was probably my biggest accolade for BMX racing, but I was very good at it, and I was riding dirt bikes, kind of here and there, but it was more or less like when my parents could take me, like when my dad
Mm.
could load up and take me. He never really rode motocross. He just he would take us, but didn't really ride much himself. He still had quads, but dirt bikes he'd never really rode. So when I got my license when I was 17 is when I really started riding dirt bikes again because I could load up my dirt bike myself in my pickup and I could go, right?
Yep.
It was more convenient. So started riding, racing more dirt bikes, and then when I was 18, I shattered my right navicular in my foot, pretty bad. And after I did that, I had just graduated high school, and my racing days at that point were pretty much over. I just I got a job right out of high school working for a Polaris dealer, where I was doing learning financing and parts, and I was pretty much running this small Polaris dealership, and it was a pretty good job, pretty good opportunity. And then shortly time after there is when I got the job, with the tool brand that I worked for. And so that was a really good job, especially for the age, right? I
Yep.
think I was maybe 20 at the time. And so I didn't really, you know, ride much from that point forward until like maybe 24, 25. It's one of those things, coach, like you know how it is when you ride and that's like in your blood, you can only go so long before you get the itch, and so it's like, man, I'm at that point I didn't even have a bike for a while, and so I was like, man, I need to get another bike and start riding. And so but I told myself, I'm gonna buy a bike, I'm gonna go ride trails. You know how many times I've ridden trails in my life, coach?
Probably got on one hand.
Once. twice,
Yeah. Yep. There
twice.
you go.
It's just as soon as I got that bike, I went to the track, because that's what I was used to.
Yeah.
And kind of history from there. I still do a little bit of racing here and there. I don't do a ton of it, just because I have so many life responsibilities now. I can't afford to get hurt. My family depends on me. And I'll be honest with you, I'm tired of getting hurt.
Yeah,
I've done my
absolutely.
collarbone, I've done my foot, hands, fingers, wrists. It's just I'm over it. So I
Yeah.
just kind of back it down. But um still very heavy in the industry, obviously, with getting hooked back up with Daniel, 25 years later, and then riding more. And then this whole tool thing that I started doing is kind of its own animal, and that's just entrenched me into the industry even more from a completely different avenue.
Go back to your BMX days. I think a lot of people are aware of the fact that Jeremy McGrath started BMX. You look at Aaron Gwynn, has a moto background, took that into downhill mountain biking. When you look at the cross germination of the two-wheeled world, whether it's moto to BMX, because you look at John Tomac, look at Eli Tomac, right? You have John, mountain bike world, actually BMX world, then going into mountain bike world, having a son, going into the moto world. It's a very small network. We just on our last show had Big E from Yoshimura. He was actually the manager for Powerlight. Ironically, such a small little world.
Yeah.
He was working with Todd Corbett. Todd Corbett's now the product development manager at Jameson Bikes, or Jamis Bikes, excuse me. Right. So, and Todd was managing the Team GT when it was the big team. It's just, I love this community because now you've got Big E at Yoshimura making pedals underneath the Yoshimura umbrella. At the same time, he's managing Jet, Hunter, and Shimoda, and
Yeah.
Hymus.
It's
So
wild.
it's yeah, the circle doesn't get too big. It just seems like more people get in it. Was there anybody that you race against that we may know in the moto world that you race against in BMX?
Trying to think.
Because I don't know with your age, like would that be Brian Lopes's days? Would you be racing against him as a 16 expert?
I think he was a little bit older
Okay. And
than
is McGrath
me.
older than you?
He's older than I am. Yeah.
All right. So he probably was already racing moto
Yep.
at the time you got to 16
There's
expert.
there's not a lot of people, honestly, from my BMX era
Okay.
that I believe race moto. It
Gotcha.
was kind of that window where there just wasn't that many guys, crossing over to moto. I can't think of any coach that come off the top of my head.
Well, I was surprised when Big E was on the show. He was talking about the idea that Eric Carter was really good on moto. And then, he got that ride with Hutch and the rest is history. Goes
Hmm.
on to become a multi-time BMX champion, mountain bike champion. And then Big E was saying that he got introduced to McGrath through Eric Carter, which again, just a small little world. I knew Eric Carter from racing BMX. I rode for KHS when he was riding for Hutch. And then I get into the moto world a little bit deeper. And then I find out that the reason why McGrath is even, associated, they all cross germinate. I know I keep using that
Yeah.
word, but that's what I've noticed with our sport. So just
Well,
thought I
it's
would be curious.
yeah, it's one of those things, like I wish that at one point, because I was very good at BMX and I was very good. I was just known to be smooth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't the guy doing 360s and
Yeah.
bar spins and stuff like that. I was extremely smooth, and we would go out to these trails, which are it's what they call dirt jumps, right?
Yeah,
They're trails, and you
exactly.
have these
Yep.
big rhythm sections, right? Where guys would, you wanted the airtime because you wanted to be able to execute that 360, or the bar
Sure.
spin or a tail wheel, whatever it is, right? Whatever trick you're doing. But that wasn't me, dude. I was staying low, and I could put these rhythm sections together just super smooth. And I think now in the moto world, like, we have some tracks where they're kind of tighter, more super crossy,
Yep.
and I excel on those because I could stay smooth. And so, but it's one of my regrets in life of not really getting into supercross, because I think that I would have been very good at supercross because I had that skill to stay low, be smooth, and put tracks together.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I think what our listeners just heard is that we need to contact Red Bull and we need to get you on a KX 500 And I think because of your ability to go smooth, I think we need to get you lined up for the next Red Bull Straight Rhythm. That's what I think, because you just articulated the origins of Red Bull Straight Rhythm is the guys riding their BMX bikes down those trails with those big, big hucks.
Yep.
And you got to be precision, like you say, just butter the background or butter the backsides the way McGrath did and made it look beautiful. I think we just found your calling, maybe a few years after your prime, but let's get after it, man.
Dude, I think my balls have shrunk since then, though.
Balls have shrunken and the brain's gotten bigger. So
Yes, yes.
it's gone one
Sometimes,
direction.
like I will, I go to the Supercross races and do track walk and stuff, and the things that those guys do with these rhythm sections now are, even from back in the day, they're just so much different, right? Because they have the power, the motorcycle's got the power to do these big rhythms. They are gnarly. Like
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Dude, those guys are insane. But
Well, I've
yes,
always said if you've never had a chance to get on the track and walk it, do a Supercross track walk, please do yourself a favor. I know it may cost a little bit of money to go do it, and then try to walk up the finish line jump. You'll realize how steep that bad boy is. And I get this question quite often. How, because I always say to my athletes, especially when I do a performance camp, first 2 laps, I don't care if you've ridden this track like yourself at East Street, right? I don't care how many times, or Riverfront, I don't care how many times you've ridden it. You don't know what they've done since the last time you're out there. Then you watch the Supercross guys, and on their first lap, they send the finish line jump. They're like, why? It's because it's to scale.
yeah,
The angle, the distance, they know it's third gear, half throttle. They can do it on their opening lap. But as I always say, please don't watch the pros and then think as an amateur you can emulate them. The bike, they're running 3-speed transmissions. They're not running 6-speed transmissions. Everything's different. Don't try to emulate a pro, because you're not riding what they're riding, and you
no,
don't ride what they ride during the week. So never hit a double that you think you've seen before. Don't ever.
nope. Sight lap, always sight lap.
Always sight lap. But I do agree with you. When you go and you walk those tracks, you're like, my gosh, you get a new perspective. And I think if you've never been to a live outdoor, and I'm sure you've seen this, especially being in California, you'll see somebody, let's just say whoever it is, right? And you're like, there's no way anybody could be physically faster. And that person you watched on Wednesday barely made the fast 40 for Saturday's qualifying. And you're just like, huh? How is that
Yeah,
even physically possible?
I
So
know, it's crazy.
you mentioned a big word that I like to kind of dig down on this show, and that was maybe biggest regret is not going in racing BMX professionally. When you look at your professional career, because you were kind enough to walk us through that athletic side, you mentioned you got into the tool representation mode. You said you were pretty early, 20, 21 years old, I think you said.
Yeah, I think it was 20.
How many years did you have that? Let's just call that generically a profession. You were on the road representing a tool company.
Yeah.
And how long did you do that for?
Let's see, that was that was 10 years. 10 or 12 years is I represented the tool brand as a manager, right? And
Okay.
did that, and then that's when I bought after that I bought my franchises, right? I was tired of working for the man, decided I wanted to work for myself. And
Sure.
if I could, assist these franchisees to be very successful, then why the hell am I not doing it on my own, right? And so
Absolutely.
that's really when I bought the franchises. And then I had some life events, world events that we probably will never see again that happened to me, which kind of put the brakes on that. But it really opened up a completely another door for me. So
What, you don't have to give specific numbers, but I've been very public about my divorce, and it literally, I got married at 22 years old, literally didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out, married 25 years. And I walked away from the marriage literally with 2 OGO bags. And I had 2 choices: either get really mad, or say to yourself, you're 50 years old, you don't have a pot to piss in and a window to throw it out, let's start over. When you bought those franchises, and here you are, you're a very young man, what kind of, like, when I talk to a lot of very successful entrepreneurs, they're like, I finally got my first loan from the bank for $1 million. And I have one friend of mine who him and his brother started a flooring business. He got his dad to essentially give him his $10,000 CD as collateral. They went to the bank, they got $1 million loan, and then they realized they don't have a building to sell flooring out of. So they
Oh,
literally for 10 years sold out of the back of their car, two brothers. Now here in Orlando, they have 7 locations. They're a
wow.
multi-million dollar, very successful. And I love, you know, nobody was around when you're sitting there going, I've got $1 million note. I just used my dad's $10,000 CD. If what's a mother of invention, necessity, I have to make this work.
Yeah.
What, where were you at such a young age with that kind of a, because you, was it one, two, three? How many of them did you pick up?
So I bought one,
Okay.
and that was the scariest thing in my life
There you
because at
go.
the time I had a baby, right? Ayla was just being born,
Okay.
and she was little, and I was making a life-changing decision. We're
Sure.
going from something where I was making a very good salary
Hmm.
and I had good benefits and stuff to nothing's guaranteed, right? But I knew that if I could always depend on myself,
Yep.
and I knew that if I just put in the work, that I was going to be okay. Even though it was scary, I used pretty much everything I had as far as money wise to put down to be able to get into business, and I just it's one of those things, coach, that when you own a business and you're a brand new business owner, you have to watch everything.
Hmm.
Anytime you go out to eat, it's like, nah, I'm not going to order a soda. I'm just going to drink water because I could save $3,
That's right.
or five now. Shit, you
Yeah.
can't even go get a freaking soda at a restaurant for less than $5.
Yep.
But it's like those little things, right? You just think of everything that you need to watch and manage, and so that's how it was for the first couple years until you start getting a nice little nest egg where you can start, living again. And my first franchise that I bought, I had a fire that, if most everybody knows, is the Paradise, the campfire in Paradise, and it pretty much burned 3/4 of my route. And so I I worked for, geez, I don't know, 6 8 months. I was working. I was went from working 5 days a week to basically two, and I just wasn't making it. I just flat out wasn't making it, and wasn't getting a whole lot of help, and had to make the decision to either ride it out and continue losing money every week, or to buy another franchise. So that's when I bought my other franchise, down in Sacramento, and I gave that one back. And again, it was kind of like starting over, coach. Although I knew what to expect this time because I had done it before, right? So I knew, again, I could count on myself. I was in a little bit better spot financially, and I was like, screw it, let's go at it again. I know I could be successful. And then COVID came, and these dealerships, laid all these technicians off, and again, like, you go from working 5 days a week to two, and with COVID, it was some days it was one, because there just was no work. And again, it was like this unknown. It was like this huge unknown, back to square one. And I did it for another 6 8 months, losing $1,000 a week. It was costing me $1,000 a week to go to work. And at that point, it's like, man, do you continue to do this? We I didn't Nobody knew at that time how long this was going to last. And so I had to make the tough decision to let go of that one. So it was pretty heartbreaking, honestly. But again, it opened up this door of new opportunity. And you know what I one of the things that I think, like, I try to find the silver lining in everything, right? And one thing that I have been made a believer in is everything happens for a reason, and God has a plan for me. And although I didn't understand it at the time, it was a blessing in disguise. And I'm just, right now, my life and my side business, I'm fortunate to have a great day job that I love. It's just, man, it couldn't be any better.
You mentioned something that I think a lot of our male listeners struggle with. Number one is we're supposed to be the hunter gatherer provider. We're supposed to be the anchor. Our partners They come to us. They could have a bad day. They want us to be the anchor. They want to be that guaranteed cornerstone that they're all looking for. One of the things talking with other male entrepreneurs is we have a lot of parent teacher conferences with ourselves. When you lost your first route because of a fire, when you lost your second franchise because of a pandemic, who did you talk to? Who did you reach out to? Did you have somebody, whether you give them a name or not? Did you just have a lot of parent teacher conferences by yourself? How'd you get through those two very dark stages?
I had my family. I leaned on my family a lot. I think you and I had multiple conversations about it. I keep my group small. Like, Daniel and I had multiple conversations. Daniel had obviously owned Eagle Grit, so he could relate to what I was kind of going through. Obviously, his business slowed down at the time, and you have to talk to somebody that can relate to you and relate with what you're going on. And I needed to talk to small business owners. I needed to talk to people that have worked for themselves, people that have gone through hard times, that had struggled. A great friend of mine, my buddy Jay, very successful person, owns a very successful business, and he really is like a mentor to me.
Nice.
I could go to him, and he always, ensured me that it was going to be okay, and that this is what your next move should be. And he really coached me through getting through both of those devastating, once in a lifetime type deals, right? And so,
Is he familiar with how instrumental he was on pulling you out of those two dark holes?
um, I think so. I mean,
Cool.
this is the guy that, I try to base myself off of. Like, I would love to be where he's at one day,
Sure.
and obviously try to go to him for advice. You don't ever want to listen to somebody that's more screwed up than yourself, right? So I always try to
Yep.
find people that are successful and try to, have relationships with those, because I think you feed off one another. Like, there's things, he's very, very successful. I would consider myself successful, but I'm sure that there's things that he learns from me and things
Sure.
that I can learn from him. So relationships like those are instrumental to me. And coach, that's why I value the relationship that I have with you. I think that there's stuff that you learn from me, and there's stuff that I learn from you, and can't replace that.
Well, and that's why I love doing this show, Meet the Guests. We can look at Connor Fields, number one in the world, to 25 meters down the front straightaway. Not sure if he's going to make it back to America alive. You look at Dr. Brainy, being an ER doc. Nothing comes easy, right? We see the success of people, and that's the hard part, is we only tend to see the end result. I wanted to make sure that people understood there was a day and a time when you went from working 5 days a week to 3 days a week, and then you relinquish that route, then you get it started again, only to get hit down to 1 day a week. That's a hard pill to swallow. And I love what you just said. I try to encourage all of our coaches. You definitely need to have that small network of people that are around you, but you always need to be trying to network with where you want to go. And
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough. It's, if you want to hang around other deadbeats, you probably aren't aspiring to be around a higher level deadbeat. You're just going to look for someone that's common. But for someone like yourself that's always results oriented, looking to grow as an individual, money comes as a byproduct of seeking to be, and I say this to my coaches all the time, try to be the best version of yourself. And that version is going to get remodeled, and it'll get remodeled, and it'll get remodeled. It's called maturity. If you look at what was important to you at 18, 28, 38, and I'm now, soon to be 58, you're like, okay, well, what was important to me 20 years ago is significantly different. And because of that, that person that you look to, I'm not going to say to be, but to aspire to be. And it's not about the money. I think that's a part that people miss. So I think that's why I appreciate you being honest and vulnerable. You didn't go asking for a loan, you asked for advice. And that to me, I think is what's a distinguishing difference between, I'm not looking for a bailout, I'm just looking for some direction. And I
Yep.
think that's what men in general, I think that's what we miss. Because unfortunately, if we show any kind of weakness, I'm not sure where this next meal is going to come from. I'm not sure how that mortgage is going to get paid. You can't go talk to your bride about that because then she's going to be losing sleep. So you and I are talking. You and I are trying to figure it out. And like you say, when you've got somebody that's more successful than you, hey, we can swallow our pride and say this guy's more successful. But what's really great, been there, done that. I don't need to go make the same mistake. He's giving me the Cliff Note version of what not to do. And I think that's the hard part as a man is we almost feel like we are almost, do we feel embarrassed for asking for help? No, no, no. Ask for help so that way you can shorten up how long it takes for you to figure this stuff out. Because man, I know when I walked out of that house with 2 OGIO bags, first thing I noticed was, you know, that old saying, when you're drinking alone, you got a problem.
Yeah.
I wasn't drinking and getting drunk. I wasn't drinking till I blacked out. I just realized I simply was having a drink with myself. So I just turned the faucet off. I'm like, nope, no, I'm not doing that because I only had my boys 3 days a week. And if you know anything, my kids are my everything. But the people that I thought were my friends, that was a joke.
Misery loves company, and that's something I learned, right? I learned that misery loves company, and to put myself in a better spot than that, and you have to recognize it. And there was certain people that I had to cut out of my life or separate myself from, right? Because they're the first ones to give you advice because they don't want you to succeed because they're not succeeding. And so I refuse to listen to those people. And again, it's tough at times. You got to just separate yourself from them, but to be better, you have to.
You bring up something that's really interesting. In your opinion, and that's a cool part about this show, is everyone has their own methodology for getting through. When you had that epiphany, when you realized, look, there's just certain people I have to disassociate with. Obviously, there's a little bit of fear that, okay, you mentioned it at the onset of the show, right? You're a creature of habit. When you start making those big, significant changes, there's someone in your family, someone in your immediate friendship loop that you had to actually, cut the vine. How did you handle that? What was your coping mechanism?
This is going to sound terrible, Coach, but some of these people, it depends on who it was, right? If it was somebody that I had a lot of respect for, I would just, at one point had a lot of respect, or a close friend, or somebody I associated myself with frequently, I told them, hey man, no disrespect, but I need some time to get things figured out and get myself figured out, my business figured out, and I just need some space. Just kind of asked for. There was others that I just, like, this sounds bad, is I just ignored them, put them on the back burner because they were the ones that were always there to give me advice, but it was shit advice. They wanted to bring me down to their level. And here's the thing that I find it rare, Coach, and I'm not going to say it doesn't exist because there's a lot of good people in the world, but there's a lot of people that don't want others to succeed. Like,
Amen.
they don't find happiness, or they don't like seeing their friends succeed. And I don't want to be friends with anybody like that. If I have a friend that doesn't want to see me do good and feed my family and buy nice things, I don't want them as a friend because I just don't, they don't care about me. They care about themselves, right? And they're using me for something, right?
100%. As I alluded to when I was going through my divorce, and I thought I had a core group of a dozen people, and not one of them called for almost 3 years.
Yeah.
So I totally understand what you're saying. It's like, you've got to, if you're not good for yourself, what are you for your daughter? What are you for your bride? Right.
Yeah.
But I think for the listeners, it's like, okay, Dan and Robb, I hear you. I get it. I understand. But you don't know my situation. And you're exactly right. We can only empathize to the best of our ability based on our own experiences. Please don't make it sound like we have all the answers. But one of the things my vision and my mission of this podcast, and maybe I'll even go out and say it's for 90% of the male listeners that I have, That's what our ratio is to the show up to this point. It's about 90% male, 10% female. And that's not a disrespect to the females, because there's those strong women that in their relationships, they're the anchor of the family. And I get it. My mom was that, you know, my mom and I lived in a car. So my mom was that guy, right? She's the hunter gatherer provider, sleeping
Yeah.
in a car, moving around every night for fear that we weren't going to make it through the night. So I know there's women out there going through a lot of stuff, but the man's never allowed to be weak. We can't ask for help. We can't show weakness, if you will. And that's why I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on how you handle, because you get the guys, oh, you just think you're better than me, Dan, right? Oh, now you're successful. Look at your daughter. Look at your beautiful wife. Oh, look at your house. Look at your career. Well, wait a second. We all had the same opportunity. Some people have a little bit more luck, right? A lot of times it's what you know. Like I say, luck is where hard work meets opportunity. And I know there's going to be some listeners that are like, I've walked the straight and narrow and I always get the short end of every stick. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for our listeners, when they hear you on the radio, when they see you and doing the things that you're doing, it's not all been a bed of roses. You
No.
know, you've slept in a lot of thorn beds. And that's what I think the listeners really, not, I think like what you said, misery loves company. We're not commiserating, but you want to know, hey, Dan had his hard times. Robb had his hard times. Yeah, sure. Heck, they have.
Yeah.
I'm hoping there's going to be one listener that can go, okay, they've been through it, but what do I need to do?
There's been a lot of sacrifices that I've made, right? And I'll give a perfect example. In my early 20s, right? I didn't go out to the bar. I didn't do the party, and I didn't do the things that that the normal, average, or everyday kid does, right? They're living the high life. They're in their mid to early 20s. I never did that. I was working a full time, and this is no disrespect or anything, but I didn't ever do that, right? I had a full time job, and there's part of me that regrets some of that, right? As you get older, like I didn't date a lot of girls, and I love my wife, and I don't regret any of that, but you know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah,
I wasn't the time, out there playing the field, and I never experienced that because I was so dedicated to making sure my life improved, financially, and getting to where I wanted to be and be able to buy the things that I want. But it comes as a price. It came at a price, and the price was missed out on a lot of stuff that most people that age do.
absolutely. Well, I say to my coaches all the time, there's a difference between an entrepreneur and a wantrepreneur. And they look at me like, what do you mean? Well, where we sit right here, right now, you have 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 12 months, 18, you can go back as far as you want. Then you have, all right, that's the past. Our past behaviors have gotten us to where we're at today. And I'm like, okay, cool. You want to become a CRS certified coach. That's awesome. I love it. You're sitting at point A. Let's talk about point C. And they're like, what about B? Hold on. You're at A. You want to get to C. How long do you want to give yourself to get to C? Let's just use an even number of 5 years. Cool. All right. So 5 years from now, this is where you want to be. And we set financial objectives. Let's do a contract. They go, what do you mean? Let's go with the typical number, right? Everybody wants to be a millionaire. Okay. You're sitting here today. What's your net asset value? $100,000. What do you want to be in 5 years? You want to be a millionaire. Do you understand that the cost of ignorance is $900,000 a year, which is the difference between what you're making and what you're worth and what you want to be? Now, here's the ultimate question. Are you willing to adjust your behaviors, your perspective, and your actions on a daily basis between now and 5 years? That involves patience. That involves sticking it out. That involves having a plan and sticking to it. And it goes back to what you said, through those disappointments, holding the straight and narrow. Because to me, that's where, yeah, everybody wants to be a millionaire. Everybody wants to be an elite athlete, but very few people are willing to be patient enough. That's why I say to my young athletes that are racers, right? I'll write a contract with you right now for $1 million. You got to give me 10 years. Are you patient enough between here and there? Entrepreneurs or a wantrepreneur? You're bragging to me that you've bought and read 20 books this year, but you haven't done a damn thing that the first book told you to do. So you're a wantrepreneur. You're not an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
How about read one book and just do half of what they say? Probably be on the fast track to where you're at. I'm not a good reader. I've shared that with the listeners before. So I'm always listening to audio, right? I'm trying to learn, but then I grab that book and, I've shared it with you and I've shared it with listeners here, the E-Myth. Read the book, but don't just read it. Just do one thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so powerful with what you shared. It's the idea that no one has the patience. You gave up your 20s as an investment, and now you're reaping those long-term benefits. Isn't that what life is all about?
Yeah.
If a listener grew up in a family where that wasn't modeled, I get it. If you didn't see it being modeled, it's very hard to grow up in it. But
Yeah.
now with the internet, I think everyone's got access to it.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't come from a family with money. Like we didn't, my parents both worked,
Mhm.
good jobs, but we were, no, we lived in a moderate house. It just, we
Sure.
didn't have money,
Mhm.
and so, but I knew what I wanted for myself, right? Down the line, because I'll give you a great example. My kid in high school, his name's Johnny, and his dad owned multiple of these tool franchises. Okay.
Okay.
And they always had brand new ski boats, quads, sand rails, dirt bikes, a huge, beautiful house with the pool in the back with the grotto. I mean, I saw that when I was young in junior high, and I'm like, man, that's what I want one day, and I kind of always just kind of worked towards that. I got in. His dad is actually the one that got me started, in the business.
Mm.
And again, it's just having that relationship, and I'm very thankful for that. But I knew that there was a sacrifice to it. It just wasn't going to come, and so those are the sacrifices that I made, and I'm very fortunate to where I'm at today. But we live in a society that everybody wants something now. Like,
Mhm.
I gotta have it now, and it just it doesn't work like that in a successful business. You're just never gonna get it now.
Mhm.
It takes work, and I'll give you a great example. Like, my business now, DCMX and Tools. When I checked in my last tool business, my route, I was gonna just fold. I was done. I was bitter with the tool business. I didn't want to do it anymore. I was pissed, right? Two of these events happen, and like I don't fucking want to see another wrench or ratchet ever in my life again.
Sure. Sure.
And I got a call as I was ending my tool business. Actually, I didn't get a call. I did eventually, but the story's pretty rad. So you know that my guy's Adam Cincerillo. That's
Amen.
just been my guy.
Yeah.
But my guy also in parallel with Adam was Ryan Villopoto,
Mhm.
and had never met Ryan, had never talked to Ryan, followed him on Instagram. Just he was the guy. And I saw on his Instagram one day that he was looking for a toolbox, and a certain size toolbox. And I thought, what the hell? I'll message him and see. I'll message him and see what if I can help him in any way, right? And I'll be damned if I didn't get a message back from him. And I
Nice.
was just like, I was total fanboy, coach. Like I don't get starstruck very often, and especially now I at the races a lot, and I know a lot of these guys and stuff. But I was like, holy shit, Ryan Villopoto just messaged me back. Long story short, he wanted a toolbox, and he wanted the foam cutouts with all the tools. So I built him one. And then when I checked in my route, he's like, well, how are you gonna keep doing these? And I said, well, I'm not. And he's like, dude, you have to. These things are awesome. Like, can you find another tool brand or this and that? Like, I think you're onto a really good idea. And so part of the credit that I give today to my business, it goes to Ryan Villopoto. In fact, he messaged me, and I talk to him. He'll call every so often just to check in, or I'll call him just to check and see if he needs anything.
Sure.
But he messaged the other day, and this was pretty cool, saying, "Hey, man, I just want to let you know that I'm really stoked for you. You've come a long ways. I see all the new products and stuff that you're adding, and it's just really cool. And it was an opportunity for me to say, hey man, honestly, I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you. Like, you encouraged me to keep on with this tool business, right?
It's awesome.
And I have had a lot of guys, that I was doing business with before, say, hey, we still want to buy tools from you. Even customers that I had on my route, I still sell tools to some of those people because they're like, hey man, it wasn't about the tool that you were selling. It was about the relationship that we had.
That's right.
And, you do what you say you're going to do, and I still want to support you. And it's those people. And coach, that's what I also learned. It's a handful of people, right? It's
Hmm.
all these people that you thought that, you were their best friends because you were giving them good deals on stuff. They don't exist. They don't exist anymore.
Yep.
The people that are still doing business with me today are people that never asked me for a discount. They never asked how much something was. They just supported my business because they wanted to support me. They
Hmm.
wanted to do business with me. And it still to this day, like my good buddies and stuff, they don't ask me for a discount. Of
Right.
course I give them a discount because
Sure.
they don't ask.
Yep.
It's not expected. But all these people that are so-called friends, hey man, can I get this at 50% off? Like, or the good ones are coaches, dude, how come I only got 20% off?
Only 20% off.
Yeah. And
You've
it's
only
just
got
like,
30% margin in it to begin with.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And I'm like, okay. Like, but
Yep.
you find those people. And
Oh
again,
yeah.
those are not your friends. Those are just they're users, right?
Well, the crazy part is the one that wants 20% off will be the first one that'll talk crap on you. It's
100%.
it's interesting how it all tends to stick together.
Yeah,
100.
it is. It's crazy. But
You've been through a lot of trials and tribulations, not any fault of your own. The fires, the COVID, the whole 9 yards. When did you realize that, okay, I've pushed that ball up the hill, it went back down. I pushed that ball up the hill, went back down. You talked about when you finally had a little bit of a savings found, first time in 4 or 5 years. When did you finally realize, okay, I'm over the top of the crest and now I don't have to worry about buying a $5 soda at dinner?
I would say, when I bought that second route, I was doing very well. And even when I bought my first route, I saved a lot of money.
Hmm.
Because when you're a business owner and you are the sole proprietor and you are the sole provider for your family as well,
Yeah.
you have to save, right? And that's why it wasn't that I couldn't afford to buy the $5 soda. It
Hmm.
was more really of a choice, right? Because like,
Absolutely.
is the $5 soda worth it? Because what happens if I get sick next week and I can't work for a week? I'm going to need some savings.
Sure.
So I saved a lot of money in that time, and I was a very successful tool dealer. I did very, very well.
Hmm.
Um, and so, but really, when I kind of pushed the ball over the hill, when I bought the second route, I knew that okay, if I can go buy the $5 soda because I know I'm going to be okay. Because the unknown of starting a brand new business from, yeah, I'm starting a new business, but I know what to expect because I've done the exact same thing before. Like, I was more comfortable with it, but I still saved a lot of money. I didn't spend a lot of money. Um, but I watched it. I still watched it, just didn't watch it as close,
Sure.
and then I built up a nice nest egg. And honestly, that was kind of what made my decision easy to leave, right? It was, got a decent amount of money in the bank. I've got a decent equity in my business. I was losing money at that time. I was losing $1,000 a week. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense to keep losing money. I don't need to lose the money. And I was fortunate enough I had a good opportunity arise. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna take this opportunity. It's a great salary, great benefits. I know I've got all this equity in my business. I've got this nest egg. This is going to allow me to take the next step in my life and to live comfortably with a nice goose egg, or not goose egg, a nice chunk of change in the bank, right? And that's where it's, I've taken some of that money and I've invested it into my new business,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm doing it the way that I want to do it, Coach. I don't I don't rely on the money to make a living. It's all organic growth. I don't
Yeah.
do any advertising. In fact, I don't do much sponsorship stuff
Mm-hmm.
because I've learned that that doesn't get you anywhere in this industry. Unfortunately, these a lot of these riders and teams, they're the users, Coach, and
Yep.
I don't have to be the cool guy. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to be like, oh, I supply factory Honda with all their tools. I don't care.
Yeah.
I just don't care. I would rather give the moto dad at the local track a deal on tools and toolboxes or whatever it is, in hopes that he'll share the good experience with another moto dad. And that's where my growth has come from. And year over year, my business doubles every single year
Yep.
because of that. And it's all organic. And that's just the way I choose to do it. And I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change it.
And you shouldn't. What would you say the total number of years that was from when, because you had your first route at 20, very young age, to that age when you're like, okay, yeah, I'm over the hump, as you were just talking about. Approximately how many years is that?
I would say probably early 30s, you know?
So let's give that a 10 year. Would you go
Yeah,
10, 12 years?
it
What
was
would you give
probably
it?
12, 13 years before I was like, yep, we're good.
So congratulations, you're a 13-year overnight success, my man.
Yeah, right. And I still don't consider myself successful. And here's the thing, like I don't have to make money
Hmm.
with my business, right? I think I've made that clear, right?
Yeah.
But I want to. Like I truly enjoy it. And I always take every opportunity that I can to try to come up with new items and new products because I enjoy it. Making the money is just icing on the cake, right?
Hmm.
It's but I truly enjoy. There's nothing like, Coach, when you deliver a brand new moto box, full of tools to I just delivered one recently to a kid or a dad and his kid, and his the dad bought it kind of for the kid, so he had something to wrench on his bike with. And it was such a satisfying experience because the kid was so stoked to have his own tools. Dad was stoked because he can have his own tools now, and the kid could stop getting into his stuff. But it was just a satisfying experience, and
Yeah.
that is what I do it for.
Well, we say within the entrepreneurial world, money is a byproduct of learning how to build, grow, and enjoy business. And people they look at the big companies like Amazon and all these others, and when you really get down to the person who's at the helm of it, they just enjoy the process of business. And once, as you said earlier, once you figure it out, that's why I hope this show motivates other men. Let's reach out, let's network, let's try to help each other get things off the ground. You've got experience I don't have, vice versa, but collectively we can get further in a shorter period of time.
Yeah,
And I think that's what's so important is you're enjoying your job. And because you enjoy your job, the business grows. The business grows because you enjoy your job. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? And I'm hoping that somebody who listens to today's webinar, or rather podcast together, really gets an idea of, hey, you know what? I'm sitting here today. Here's my life 3, 6, 12, and 18 months ago. And here's where I want to make a contract with yourself from now. Heck, hit Dan and I up. We'll sign a contract with you. Let's hold each other accountable to where we want to get. Could be in a month, it could be in a decade. Doesn't matter what the number is, but let's try to lift each other up. Let's try to help each other, especially for those of you who are entrepreneurial by spirit. And even if that doesn't mean that you've built a company by yourself, let's use this webinar platform. Let's use this podcast platform to network together. What can we do to help each other grow? And even so much as, when you're, and I've said this publicly, you guys are in a dark place, reach out. And all we could do is try to offer help, guidance. But as men, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's
yeah.
just, it's one of the things I think is so hard. Dan, I can't thank you enough for being somewhat vulnerable, kind of exposing yourself. Do you have about 5 minutes for what we call
Yeah,
the rapid?
yeah. I got one more thing I want to say.
Please do. Please
If
do.
you are an entrepreneur and you're looking at starting a business and you want to grow something, right? Here's my advice. You need to find something that you're passionate about and something that's going to continue to drive you to get to where you want to be. And it can't, I guess it could be the money, right? If that's truly what you're after. I think we're all in it for the money. You know, I say that kind of,
Tongue
people
in
are probably
cheek.
like, he's
Yep.
full of shit. You know, of course you
Yep.
want, of course I do. It's, you know, but I am passionate about selling tools and I'm passionate about working in the motocross industry and working with the people associated with motocross that need tools. That's what drives me, right? You need to find something that you're passionate about that's going to keep driving you because I see a lot of these things on Instagram and TikTok and stuff where, you know, oh, for $20, we'll set up a Shopify store for you. And, you know, you could direct ship freaking, you know, wicker baskets and power bars to people and this and that. It all sounds great and all, but if you don't have passion for it, you're not going to want to do it and you're not going to want to grow it. And I'll go a step further. I get a lot of time, or a lot of folks that hit me up all the time to say, how come you don't offer tools to the UTV guys? Or how come you don't offer tools to the go-kart guys? I could easily, coach. I
Hmm.
could easily. I don't have the passion for
It's
it.
not your passion.
So
Amen.
I'm
Yeah.
not, so I don't want to do it. And
Hmm.
so um, that's why, and not that I won't, like if you truly want me to build you a toolbox for go-karting, I'll do it, right? But I don't have the passion for it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to put these things in production to go out and sell go-kart toolboxes because it's not my thing,
Right.
right? I will share with you one thing I am doing though, coach. I think you're going to find this kind of cool.
Talk to me.
Although I don't have a strong passion for this,
Hmm.
um, I do in a certain sense because it revolves around the cycling world,
Okay.
which I see you, I've perked your interest.
Yes, sir.
So I do ride mountain bikes. I've got my Levo. I'm a e-bike guy. I'm kind of lazy now these days. As funny as it sounds with my BMX background, but I like to have the motor. Um, but Cam Zink, do you know who Cam Zink is?
I've heard the name, but I would be lying if I said I'm very familiar with.
Cam is he is like the man at Red Bull Rampage
Okay.
mountain biking, where they do backflips off the cliffs and just
Yep.
it is gnarly, right? So he has hit me up because he wants to start doing some toolboxes and offered his assistance in helping grow this market segment of mine,
Nice.
um, to do toolboxes for the mountain bike and cycling world.
Very
So
cool.
I'm getting ready to start that. So I think that's gonna be pretty cool. And it kind
That's
of
going to
is
be huge.
relative to two wheels, you know, it's
Yep.
kind of my thing, but yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that.
Well, and the idea that he reached out to you is just another testimony of exactly what we're talking about. Stay true to the passion. I mean, look at the late Ken Block. What was our tie-in? DC Shoes, Travis Pastrana, Red Bull, the rally car. It all just
Yep.
the circle just slowly gets bigger by osmosis and who you know, and it goes back to passion. We can all sit around a bonfire and talk about the fun, the challenges, the ups, the downs, the lows, the going back and bench racing on past races. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning. It
I'll
really
say
does.
this. I'll say this. Here's the key. And the gentleman that started me in the tool franchises when I was 20 years old, this
Yeah.
is what he told me. He said, Dan, it's not what you have. It's not anything, but who you know. Who you
Mhm.
know is the most important thing, and who you surround yourself with is the most important thing. Not what you know, it's who you know.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's all about leverage, leverage of knowledge, or leverage of relationships. Like you said earlier, not a taking advantage of a relationship, but making it a win-win instead of a only one-sided win. And you and I could sit and probably rattle off 20 of those things right there. But I couldn't agree with them more. And like you said, because of that ideology, he had the big house and he had the sand buggies and he had the motorcycles and quads and everything that caught your attention because obviously at that young age you were all into motors even to
Yeah.
this day, but obviously at that point not understanding, hey, the cost of that aeronautique's 200 grand. Okay, it has a
Yep.
little bit of a different punch to the gut. You might be enamored by seeing that boat on the water, but the money that it takes to buy it, maintain it, like you say, that's where the passion comes in. Because then the 200 grand for the boat, you've got it because you're living your passion. You're
Yep.
not working like a hamster on a treadmill because you're in bondage to a big boat. So it's very profound. Well, man, I can't thank you enough, and I'm hoping that your story is once again moved both men and women, but particularly for men, not being afraid to ask for help and realizing that here you sit at the pinnacle of the sport, both professionally and in your passion project with podcasts, but didn't, as we said earlier, didn't just fall on your lap. You
Yeah.
had to go pick through all those thorny beds. So good job.
Okay, I'm ready for your 5 minutes now.
No, here's what's fun. So what I always like to do is at the end of every show, I always like to just get some random questions out there. Some are short, some you can go as long as you want. But if I gave you $100,000 tomorrow, what kind of business would you start?
Oh man. If I probably would not start another business, but I would
Okay,
probably invest it into my current business.
nice.
Um, yeah, I don't know what I would want to do, Coach. I mean, I always had I've always had this desire to open a motorcycle shop.
Okay.
Just
Even
because,
after working at the Polaris dealership?
yeah. But there's not a lot of money. There's not
Yeah.
a lot of money in motorcycle shops, and you have to do repair, right?
Mhm.
If you're going to make money, you got to do repair.
Yep.
And the labor costs these days, especially in California, to pay a good technician, which I would pay
Hmm.
whatever I got to pay to get a good technician. One of the problems is there's a lack of good technicians.
Yeah.
There's in today's day and age, everybody's into the tech stuff, and
Hmm.
computers and this and that, and we have a shortage of kids getting into these trades, such as being a mechanic.
Yeah.
That's what's tough. I think that would be the biggest hindrance for me in opening a motorcycle shop would be the fact of finding good help would be tough.
Let's elaborate on that for just a moment. And for the listeners, please don't check out on us. We're going to come back to the questions, the rapid questions. You're currently partnering with a trade school. Do you mind
Hmm.
elaborating on that? Speaking on what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. So last year I built some toolboxes for a school. It's called MXSX Tech, and it's a guy by the name of Scotty Atkins. He was a mechanic in the industry, for years, and he opened up this school, and it's unique. It's kind of like MMI, the Motorcycle Mechanics Institute, but it's more specialized for motocross and supercross, and he teaches you how to get into um, suspension, engine rebuilding, race prep, prepping the gate behind a national. It's very much driven towards motocross, supercross, dirt bikes instead of motorcycles in general.
Yep.
His program is awesome. His job placement within industry for these kids is very, very high, and so very cool program. But about a year ago, he had one or two students. They reached out to me on their own. They saw my product on the Instagram, and they wanted to buy a toolbox with the foam cutouts with all the tools. That's kind of what I specialize in. So I got a couple kids dialed in. They went to class. They were very successful. One of the reasons that they were very successful in class is because the box had everything that they needed to go to class with. And so that was last year. This year, I got bombarded with like a lot of orders from these kids, wanting to go to class, and they wanted the toolbox. One of the kids shared with me that said, "Hey, Scotty specifically told me to reach out to you to get me dialed in with a toolbox." So I'm thinking, oh man, well, this is pretty cool. Like, Scott is telling these kids to reach out to me, obviously, because he trusts my product and
Exactly.
trusts this kit that I'm building these kids that they could be successful with. So I called him up a couple weeks ago and I said, hey, Scotty, I want to thank you for one, for sending, these kids my way. Is there anything in my setup that I could do differently to satisfy, your kids and making sure that they're successful in school? And he said, no. That's what's so unique about your setup is it has everything that you need to work on a motorcycle
Yep.
in one toolbox. There's not a bunch of extra stuff. He's like, you've done a very good job of providing what is needed. And so he went as far as saying that, potentially in the future he's going to be purchasing the boxes and going to be adding these to the kids' tuition because he feels like, for you to be successful, you got to have the right tools in
Exactly.
any job, any career,
Exactly.
right? And I'm providing that for these kids. So I'm very pumped about that opportunity.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up. If we have a listener who owns a dealership or you're a young family and you want a practice mechanic or whatever, definitely reach out to Scotty. And that's what piqued my interest. The idea that this guy's like, hey, if you've got good tools, you can do a good job. And this is a guy that's putting quality out there. And Dan, how many people do we know? Yeah, I hired a mechanic, he didn't show up. I hired a mechanic, he didn't know how to set sag.
Yeah.
It just, this is something that Scotty is specializing in. Again, another gentleman who's extremely passionate, and he's passionate about his graduates. And it goes
Yep.
back to what you're saying. We're lacking that skill set. That trade is starting to die on the vine. And I just thought that that would kind of tie in with our entire show today. Hey, it's about networking. It's about doing a good job. It's about showing up early. It's about putting your name on the line for integrity purposes. And guess what? Everybody benefits. So when you
Yep.
mentioned that to me a couple of weeks ago, I thought that was very, very cool.
Yeah.
Where would you consider the worst place on the face of the earth based on your past travels?
Oh, well, I've never been out of the country.
Okay.
So, I've never been out of the country. So, but I would have to say I know this is going to shock you, coach, but I think DC is a shithole.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Imagine.
Washington DC is a shithole.
Yeah.
Um, not my place. Hopefully we could change that, coach, here in the next
Yeah.
month or so, but
There you go.
yeah, I don't know that for some reason Houston, Texas. I wasn't
Okay.
I wasn't pumped with Houston, like downtown Houston.
Yeah.
Um, as sad as this sounds, we have one of the most beautiful cities in the world
Hmm.
close to me, and that's San Francisco.
Yep.
Used to be one of the most beautiful. It is an abs. I wouldn't. You couldn't pay me to go there. In fact, it's very sad because I have great memories of my childhood, of my parents taking me to the wharf, and it's just it was a very cool city. I can't share that same experience with my daughter because it's just flat out not safe.
Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
think that's terrible for all these big cities in America. They are unsafe places to be. And some of these places are the most beautiful places in the world, and the average person can't go there anymore. So
Yeah. No, good point. I asked you if you'd found, or if I gave you 100,000, what would you do? If you found $100 on the ground, what would you do with it today?
for one, I would look around to see if somebody may have dropped it because I think that that's the right thing to do. I don't know. I've been watching these videos on TikTok, coach, of this guy that he takes this envelope full of fake $100 bills
Mm,
and he follows people in the grocery store and like acts like he picks it up behind him. Oh, sir, you dropped this, and
yeah.
the amount of people that just pick it up and oh, thank you so much, and put it in their pocket. It's it what the
Says a
fuck,
lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Says a lot.
But if I found $100 and it wasn't nobody's and I could keep it, um, I would probably buy a new tire for my dirt bike.
That's fair. What would
Which
you what's your tire choice?
the new MX-34 Dunlop's a pretty good tire. I
Okay.
really like that tire, and I've been running the new MX-14 in some of the softer stuff, and
Yeah.
that is for like a sand track. That's a game changer. Like that is a bitchin' tire. Does not work that great on hardpack. I learned that, but
Yep.
yeah, it's a good tire.
So one of my good friends, Mr. Bud Guthrie, he owns Bud's Pro uh, Tire Paste.
Oh, I need you to hook me up with him, by the way.
Okay, I sure will.
His stuff is the best tire paste
It's the
ever.
best ever. Yep. The
Yes.
Pro Buds is, but my question to you is, do you change your own tires or do you have somebody else do them for you?
So I am the worst at tires.
Me
In
too.
fact,
I confess.
for years
Yep.
I did not change tires because I hated fighting them.
Yeah.
It wasn't worth it. And you know me, I'm very particular about my stuff. My
Yep.
stuff always looks factory.
Yep.
They can't
No
be
scratches.
scratched. It can,
Yep.
yeah, and I would destroy wheels, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. So I would take them to the shop. Well, labor rates are not cheap, as I mentioned earlier, and to go to the local shop to have a set of tires changed, if you need tubes, like you're looking at close to $100
Yeah.
for labor and tubes, right? So I ride a lot and I've got a lot of bikes, and so I'm like, man, I got to stop being a puss and I got to learn how to do tires. So I found some really good manufacturer for some really good tire irons.
Nice.
And so I carry those on my store. That's what I use to remove the tires. They're very high leverage. They've got like a very high polished chrome finish, so they don't scratch the wheels.
Nice.
But they work killer. And then I found this tool called the Baja No Pinch tool, and it's a handheld tool that slides down in the rear or in the bearing of the center of
Hmm.
the hub, and it's got like this arm on it that you pull, and then this other arm pushes, and it pushes the bead onto the wheel.
Nice.
It makes changing tires effortless, and I sell those on my website as well. In fact, you could buy them direct, but if you go to my website and use the link, you can get a little bit of a deal on it. But um, I anybody that is afraid to do their own tires or is fed up with paying the shop to do your tires,
Yep.
those tire irons and the Baja No Pinch tool will save your life.
Absolutely. I
It
love it.
makes it easy. Yep.
Well, and then you add the Pro Buds on there. That tire paste is a game changer.
So
I wished I had found it a long time ago.
me too, because I was using the Yamaha spray lube stuff,
Hmm.
and it works good, but it dries quick,
That's my
right?
problem. Yeah.
Where that Bud's tire paste, I ordered a tub of that stuff is incredible.
Yeah.
So,
He's onto something big there. Who would you say either represents or who was your childhood hero?
uh, as a child, it would be Ricky Johnson.
Okay.
Ricky Johnson was like he was my idol growing up.
Now
Just
you're talking for our moto heads, you're talking about RJ, right?
yep, yep,
Okay.
RJ, yep.
All right. Just want to make sure.
Rick
Nice.
Johnson. I love Jeff Ward growing up, and as those guys retired, I always admired Ricky, just from a sheer just grit point of view. Um,
Where were you at when you opened up the magazine and Fox had the Thinking Man with RJ butt naked
I
inside
just
cover?
I just saw that the other day.
Yep.
What's crazy is like how edgy those guys were back in the day. Like that would never happen these days,
No.
you know?
And we see and we think today we're so progressive. And I'm like, dude, they were, you know, when you see like the ad Racer X does the ads that couldn't have been published today. It's like,
Yeah,
Ricky Johnson comes in or Lachine comes in or the machine gun Lachine came in and won Anaheim won. Like
yeah.
DC says, you couldn't say any of those things nowadays. It'd all be
No.
censored. Um, speaking of RJ, were you a member of the Bad Boys Club?
Oh,
Did you have the die cut sticker that with uh,
of
the
course.
big hair? Yeah. The
And in fact, what's crazy is when I got my driver's license, the bad boy days were over, right? Ricky was he was retired
done. Yeah.
and whatnot, and the bad boy club kind of went away. But
Yep.
I kept a sticker that I had got when I was younger, when Bad Boy Club was still going strong. And I always told myself, I'm going to put this sticker on my first car. And I
Nice.
remember the day that I put that sticker on my 89 S10 pickup. I
There
was
you
like
go.
stoked. I'm like, yeah. And
Yep.
everybody's like, what is that sticker? And then
That's the key. How many people go, yes, and how many are like, what the heck is that?
a
That's how
lot
you
of
can
what the heck
tell.
is that? Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Do you have a box of what I call memorabilia stickers? Like I've got all the rainbow JTs that were squared, semicircle, the original Scott, the High Point boots, the
Oh yeah.
Bel-Ray logos. Do you have your whole box of stickers?
It's funny, Coach, because I have a box, and this was literally Saturday. I had been piling up stickers on my little mini fridge in my garage
Okay.
because I knew I was getting close to running out of room in my box. So I went to go put them in that box. I'm like, yep, I'm out of, I had to start a new box. So
Wow.
I do. I have my little memorabilia stickers. They're
Yeah.
probably worth a fortune to somebody that loves stickers.
Well, the one that always stood out to me was the blue and yellow High Point. And when you it was literally you could like if you took your fingernails, it was like vinyl. It was so thick. And you think about today's stickers, I mean, they fade in the sun super easy, but it's to me the sticker box is always where it's at. Well, man, I can't thank you enough. Like I said, thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for encouraging our listeners, man, male and female. And man, congratulations on all your success. I consider you a dear friend. And
Thank
on
you.
behalf of all of our listeners, thank you so much for your time. Can you let anybody who may not be following you on Instagram or may not be aware of your website, where can they find you, buddy?
Yeah, if you go to Instagram, my Instagram is at DCMX Tools. My website is dcmxtools.com. If you want to follow my personal Instagram page, it's Dan Colvin 633. I'm not real interesting. I do most of my stuff on my business page on Instagram, but yeah, you can follow me over there. If you have any questions, message me. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, and
Yeah.
I love helping you guys. If you have any questions about anything at all, tool related, not tool related, I I don't like to help guys with their marriage, but I mean I will if I have to, you know. But yeah, no, I'm open to helping, and especially if you're looking to start a business and need some advice. I love to see people be successful, and if there's
Absolutely.
any way at all that I can help you be successful, please let me know.
Well, I appreciate it so much. And for all of you who have liked and subscribed and signed up, thank you so much. Thank you for supporting the Coach Robb Podcast Network. This episode again is brought to you by our friends at BMW. Dan, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
You got it.
Peace.